Hi, my name is Carmen, and I am an early childhood special education teacher, a life and ADHD coach, and I'm the host of this podcast, Authentically ADHD. I created this podcast to help anyone wondering if they have ADHD, people who have been diagnosed for a while and want some more support and community. I'm here to bring you the latest research on ADHD and neurodiversities while we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of ADHD. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi there, my friend, and welcome back to the podcast. I am so glad you're here. I definitely did not have the motivation to record today. It is a rainy day in November. It's actually the day after my 33rd birthday. And, birthdays to me seem to get insignificant as the years go on. I don't know if you feel the same way. I often forget, when people ask me how old I am, I often forget. My general answer is around, my early 30s, I think, 32, 33. I'm 33. I was 33, turned 33 yesterday. Now it's December, so my birthday is in November, and it's in the beginning of November, so I'm also having a lot of feelings because, yesterday, my birthday's on the 4th, all right? So every 4 years, I get to have a birthday that is surrounded by drama of the election year, and I'm not going to share my views here. If you've listened to me for any amount of time, I'm sure you can assume what my views are and all of that. But let me just say that for an ADHDer, it makes for a pretty emotional time during my birthday. And I found a different way, a way to process this information and a way to process my emotions and come up with alternative actions. And I'm going to explain to you the new way that I learned how to do this. And the reason that I learned how to do this is because I learn from different sources, okay? A lot of times you will hear my little plug for Focused, and that's always in my show notes link, my link in my show notes. So sorry about that trip over my words, but it's always down there because I learn a ton from Focused. Now, I do like to learn from other avenues, and my coach supports that. So this is something I learned from Haley Honeyman. Her courses are linked down below. They are very affordable, and for anyone who's looking for just a little more information on some things, she has some really good hour-and-a-half courses and then some really good sessioned courses. So the more expensive, I think the $15 ones are 4 or 5 video sessions, and then the $8 ones are about an hour-and-a-half to 2-hour one video session, but they're very useful, and this is where I learned about active processing, and then I wanted to dig in and learn more. So today we're talking about something I have been learning about, and I've learned to do in order to help me with problem solving, masking, planning, decision making, and processing my emotions. So did you know that neurodiverse brains are unable to passively process? We have to actively process things. Now, did I just confuse you? Let me explain what passive processing versus active processing is. So passive processing is when the brain attempts to absorb information without much interaction or engagement with it. So imagine sitting through a lecture but not taking notes, or watching a video with new information without being able to ask any questions. In passive processing, the person receives the information but doesn't need to fully engage to retain it. Now, this is sometimes useful for in-the-moment problem solving and mindful thinking, but while it is useful and neurotypical people are able to use it much more effectively than we are, because the ADHD brain doesn't develop like this. It doesn't provide, the passive processing process passive processing process. Wow, that's a weird thing to say. But that way of doing things doesn't provide enough stimulation for our brains. So we need to sit down and purposely engage with the information. We have to process our emotions and come up with solutions. We need to use active processing. So in active processing, we are actively engaging with the information, giving our brains something to do with it. This can look a ton of different ways, but first I kind of want to give you a metaphor to think about active and passive processing as the difference between being a chef and a diner at a buffet. So you're either the chef or the person who's eating. When you're actively processing, you're the chef in the kitchen, selecting ingredients, experimenting with flavors, and preparing each dish thoughtfully. You're fully engaged, crafting an experience and making connections between each ingredient and taste and deciding what people will like versus what they won't like. And active processing is about diving in, adjusting, and creating something unique from what you've learned. Passive processing, on the other hand, is like being the person who's eating, the diner at a buffet. You passively sample bits and pieces without much thought, tasting some flavors and skipping over others. And while you're taking things in, you're not invested in creating or deeply connecting with each item. You're just moving from plate to plate without much focus. And in passive processing, oh my goodness, it's easy to forget what you have tried or just leave with a vague sense of what you've just experienced. When you add in all of the stimulation, when you think about a buffet and people and lights and noises, for neurodiverse brains especially, active processing helps with engaging and deeply finding clarity, while passive processing can leave gaps and create jumbled experiences, leading to miscommunications, impulsivity, etc., etc. So we can do this in a ton of different ways. So if you've ever felt like your mind just needs to do something to actually learn or process and use the information, then you're in the right place. We're going to talk about why intentional active processing works for the ADHD brain and helps us not get stuck in the rumination, and how it helps us with problem solving, regulation of self and emotions, and prioritizing and planning. So, how can we as ADHDers use active processing to benefit us by actively engaging with information instead of passively absorbing it? Because, again, we need that stimulation of active processing. Now, I want to tell you a little disclaimer. It does take practice. It is a skill you need to learn how to do. I have been learning about this since June, I think, or maybe even last year in May is when I found Haley Honeyman. It was a while ago, about almost 5 months. And I'm still learning how to do it. Now, passively processing may look like reading silently, listening to a lecture without taking notes, and these feel incredibly uncomfortable for us. I'm not sure about you, but I'd much rather take notes during the lecture and mark that book up while listening to the audio version at the same time. We retain information better when we are actively engaged in the activity. So, why and how can we make this work for our brain? Well, we can use it to purposefully sit down and process our emotions, question what we did, and solve problems that we can use later in life. We can do this by writing, talking, using a voice recording app, journaling, therapy, talking with a loved one. It's actually one of my favorite ways to journal, and it's a way to journal where you can solve problems, create room for questioning, and process your emotions, because we are really unable to do that passively. Like, we are already unable to passively process, and then we have emotional dysregulation on top of it. We cannot do that passively. We need to engage in an active manner to process those emotions and come up with alternative solutions. So, using active processing also boosts our dopamine. because you are writing things down and or talking things out or using movement. So especially if you are a person who likes multisensory engagement, for example, taking a shower while talking out loud to process your emotions, or taking a walk while you talk on the phone with a friend, or taking down notes while you listen to journal prompts in your ear. It gives us a chance to come up with solutions to problems, question our actions, and create curiosity around things that we may have taken without fully thinking it through. We may have taken those actions without fully thinking it through. And then giving us an opportunity to come up with alternative actions that align with our values. Engaging touch, sight, movement, and or sound will help you learn and retain the information. This is how neurodiverse brains work. They cannot passively process. I feel like a broken record, but I feel like I need to drill this into your brain. We have to find ways to actively process. If you learn how to do this skill, I promise you, it will improve your life. It's especially useful when we need to problem solve something. For example, making the same mistake over and over again, or having a big overlooming project that you don't know where to start. You can sit down and process those emotions, come up with all these different options to either avoid making the mistake again, options of where to start, and question why you may want to start there or why you continue to make those mistakes, and intentionally think of different solutions that you can try. This is most beneficial when we eliminate most of the distractions around us and our basic needs are met. Ideally, you will find that this technique works best the technique that you choose will work best when your needs are met and you have eliminated a lot of distractions. It's a little bit of just creating a space in order to feel safe to do this. Don't worry, we will talk about different techniques in just a few minutes. This is the other benefit for ADHDers is that active processing supports our working memory and recall. Because our brains really love actively engaging in tasks, they tend to retain the information that you're working with when you actively process versus passively. It creates little trails in our brains that helps us to rewalk those trails in real time. That is called a brain synapse, and as you do this, it strengthens those synapses. In essence, you're rewiring your brain. That's why I love this tool so much, because you can solve problems before they arise and train your brain to use those solutions in the moment. This can improve your relationship with yourself, with others. It can improve your work life, productivity, impulsivity, and emotional and self-regulation. Okay, now that we've talked about what it is and why it's great for the brain, let's talk strategies. What are the different ways that we can actively process with our situations, thoughts, emotions, problems, and plans, and come up with alternative solutions and question our thoughts and actions? As always, take these techniques and take the ones that work for you, adjust and evaluate as needed, and trash the ones that don't. One way that we can actively process is through talking or verbal processing. This can be done alone, with a trusted person, and or a therapist. Talking out loud, whether it's self-talk or talking to another person, can help us find patterns, break down the information, and come up with new alternatives that benefit us. It's really useful because you can bounce ideas off of another person and get a different perspective. Another way that we can do this is through visual avenues. Personally, I love to use mind mapping to problem solve and prioritize because I'm a visual person. You can also do this virtually. I personally like to do it on paper, so I like to print out mind maps and use those. I also use a corkboard with different colored, cubes of paper that I write tasks on in order to organize projects and prioritize things. It makes it really easy for me when I can physically manipulate things because I'm visual. And when you make it aesthetically pleasing to you, it will also help you be motivated to do it because that boosts dopamine. Incorporating movement, like going for a run, a walk, or a bike ride, or even cleaning while you're actively processing, can all fall into this category. Any kind of movement. Moving is very helpful for ADHDers while actively processing because it helps us focus. It creates and releases dopamine and norepinephrine and helps you get motivated. It's actually science and research. I have a whole episode on it. It's actually one of the top 10. Go back and listen to that to hear why working out and moving your body helps so much with ADHD. Another great way and another favorite of mine is journaling. Whether you're brain dumping or intentionally reflecting using questions or using a specific topic that you're trying to problem solve for, journaling is a wonderful way to actively process things. Within journaling, we can process overwhelm, we can break things down, we can prioritize, we can process our emotions, we can reflect and evaluate and adjust. I mean, honestly, you can do so much within journaling. But I know that it's not everyone's cup of tea. I'm giving different options because often we also like novelty as ADHDer. So changing the way you do actively process will increase your interest. Picking different ways and different strategies will keep you motivated to do it because ADHD brains are novelty interest based. So our brains are more motivated to do it. And you want to create motivation to do this because it may seem new now. Believe me, I understand. But you'll realize quickly it is a harder task to do once the novelty wears off. So you're going to have to find ways to increase the interest and add it up when you lose motivation. So when you do lose that motivation, change it up. The final technique that I'm going to talk about today, but definitely isn't like the only other technique within active processing, is using hands-on avenues. This can look like putting tasks on note cards and physically manipulating them, using a calendar that has stickers or magnets, or a corkboard with pins. You can, any way that you can manipulate the objects. The other way that you can do this hands-on process is by teaching someone else the skills that you want to master. This technique works well when you are a person who benefits from hands-on experiential learning. I definitely learn very well this way, and I love to teach others what I've learned. And having the ability to effectively teach others what you've learned is criteria for mastering that skill. I know this from my college education because I use this technique personally and with my students and clients. Once you're able to teach a skill to another person, you have, quote unquote, mastered that skill, even though we can continue to improve in life. You can act out or draw out what you've learned and use physical cards on a board or on a desk to organize those ideas. So those are just a handful of ways that you can engage in active processing. And if those tips sparked another idea, go for it. And I'd love to hear about it. There is no wrong way, unless it's a way that doesn't work for you. Again, if you want to learn a little bit more about this, I just want to take a quick minute to thank Haley Honeyman for the great courses that I've gotten from her. They are amazing. And they are different perspectives on different aspects of ADHD. I've done almost all of them. So if you're interested, the link is down in my description. So, last little bit here, now that we've covered what active processing is, different ways to engage in it, and the benefits of it, I want to give you some examples of when or where you can use active processing practically in your daily life. Active processing is super useful because you can use it in a lot of different areas of your life. For example, depending on your job, active processing at work can be a super useful tool. I take notes at meetings, I write out my lesson plan before putting it in the computer, and active processing is a great way to problem solve, plan, prioritize, and regulate your emotions. If you don't have a space to do this at work, you can dedicate time to do active processing about work, but in a space at home. Another area of life that you can apply active processing to, which was surprising to me when I learned about it, is in social settings and areas of relationship. You can use it to remember names, to keep track of details about your loved ones, to reflect on experiences socially. I've personally learned that this really helps when cultivating new relationships. After a conversation, you can use active processing to help you process that information. Remember it for the next time that you have, a new relationship, and build stronger, more connected relationships by keeping track of those things. And the third area of life that active processing can be used is the one of personal growth and learning. Active processing is extremely beneficial for a growth mindset because it allows for questioning, reflection, and adjustments. It involves being open and willing to learn. You can turn my podcast into an active processing technique by using one of the strategies to reflect on what you learned and how it can benefit you. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is not something that you will learn how to do with just one podcast. It takes practice, and to be authentic, it doesn't always feel great. So I want to give you some practical tips for getting started today. 1, start small. As ADHDers, we love to go all in and try to start too much all at once. This will lead to overwhelm and essentially giving up. Start with one technique in one area. You can always build from there. Number 2, tailor these techniques to fit you and your ADHD. ADHD is a spectrum. Different people who have ADHD are affected on different levels and by different things. So personalize these strategies to fit your needs. Number 3, don't be afraid to experiment. Reflect, adjust, and switch it up as needed. Try a few methods and keep what works and trash the rest. Reflect on how it's going periodically to see if change is needed. When you're unmotivated, change it up. All right, my friends, we have covered a lot today. So if you need to save this episode to listen again, here is your reminder. I also have a freebie follow along in the description that you can use to actively process this episode and choose how you'd like to start. It also includes some questions that you can ask yourself to actively process on a day-to-day basis. I challenge you to try at least one strategy this week and then reflect on it. And I'd love to hear your experience with it. Remember to follow and rate the podcast and share it with those that you feel will benefit from it. Help me to help as many ADHDers as we can. Our brains may be wired differently, but with active processing, we can make focusing, learning, and reflecting work for us instead of fighting against us. That is all I have for now, my friends. Stay authentic, and we will talk soon. Speaking of extra supports, I just wanted to tell you all that I've updated my Patreon page to include all of the resources that I've really ever made to be held in one place. Just head to my show notes. The VIP members do get a little extra, but you can also purchase like my brand new Ultimate ADHD Journal and Planner, which I've been using for the past year that has worked. Nothing is priced over $10, and everything is at least 50 to 100 pages that you can download and print. You can get it to bind it and sent to you, or you can just read it off your screen and use notebook paper. So if you want or need any type of that kind of extra support, just head to my show notes and click the Patreon link to join. I hope to see you in there.